Welcome back to the deep dive. Today, we are looking at a really complex spiritual movement, the Science of Identity Foundation, or SIF.
And specifically, its Polish branch, which is called Instytut Wiedzy o Tożsamości Myślitelnej. We'll just call it IWT.
Right, IWT. So our mission for this deep dive is to look at the foundational controversies, the alleged control tactics, and the financial stuff, all based on testimony from former members.
And to really understand any of this, we have to start with the main figure, Chris Butler. His followers know him as Jagad Guru Sitaswarapananda Paramahamsa.
And right there, that's where the contradictions start, with that very title.
Exactly. His whole spiritual identity seems to be built on some pretty significant paradoxes from the very beginning.
Okay, so let's unpack that right away. It seems to be the fundamental challenge to his legitimacy within this tradition he's supposed to represent. Butler was initiated as a sannyasin. What does that mean exactly?
It's the ultimate monastic vow. A sannyasin takes a lifelong oath of celibacy and non-ownership. So, no material possessions, no wealth. Your life is purely spiritual.
And the sources we have say he kept his title, Siddhaswarapananda, and even the highest rank, Paramahamsa, after he married his student, Wailana, in 1982.
Yes, and that is the core issue.
So wait, he holds onto a title that means ultimate renunciation while breaking the two biggest rules of that path, celibacy and not owning anything.
Precisely. In the tradition, if you break those vows, you have to give up the title. You go back to being a regular householder. But the sources claim Butler didn't do that. And on top of it, he allegedly amassed millions of dollars.
Wow.
So it's a direct, very public contradiction of the vows that actually give him his spiritual authority in the first place.
And the origin story just makes it all, murkier. Critical sources allege his enlightenment wasn't from, traditional study.
No, it allegedly came during a 6-month juice fast. This was early on, around the time he set up the Haiku Meditation Center.
And this fast?
It allegedly involved the use of LSD and hashish.
Okay. That definitely complicates the picture of a traditional guru.
It certainly does. And it gives context for the critics who say his entire foundation is built on his own personal experiences, not on scriptural authority. Which leads us to the next big area, the alleged theological deviations.
Right, the doctrine. The ex-members we're drawing from claim his teachings stray pretty dramatically from Orthodox Gaudiya Vaishnavism.
They use a very specific term for it, apasiddhanta.
Which means?
It basically means heresy, a philosophical distortion of the truth.
And we have some pretty startling examples of that, right?
Oh, yeah. The sources cite some really odd things. For instance, Butler allegedly questioned the usefulness of negative numbers in his teachings.
Negative numbers.
Yes. And beyond that, the doctrine reportedly had this hostility toward Islam and a general skepticism toward science.
But the biggest theological insult that critics use is calling him and his followers sahajias. What does that word imply?
It's a very loaded term. Sahajias are seen as deviants, people who focus on the easy, sentimental side of devotion, but skip the discipline and ethics.
The easy pass.
Exactly. It's often aimed at gurus who broke their sannyasa vows, like Butler. But critics say the problem is deeper, that the whole organization is about superficial performance, not real transformation.
And if the theology wasn't enough, the communication style detailed in these ex-member accounts is extreme. It paints a picture of intense control, even abusive language.
It's shocking. His alleged rhetoric, according to these transcripts, was incredibly hostile, and not just towards critics, but to his own followers.
What are we talking about here?
He allegedly called his own disciples fucking neophytes and all demons.
Wait, hold on. Demons? He's calling his own committed followers demons. How does that even work to build loyalty?
Well, it does a few things that are critical for a high-control group. First, it cements his absolute authority. The follower is always imperfect, so they can never question him. Second, it makes them totally dependent on him for salvation. If you're a demon, only his grace can save you.
So it keeps them anxious and always seeking his approval?
An approval they can never really get. And this wasn't just for his inner circle. He allegedly said his spiritual brothers in ISKCon, another branch of the same tradition, are just clumps of dog stool.
So a classic us versus them mentality.
Textbook. And of course, this control structure very quickly became about money. Access to the guru became transactional.
How so?
Accounts claim he demanded money just to attend gatherings. One source says they were told they could come if they paid $100.
Okay.
Later, that allegedly went up to $1,000 per gathering.
$1,000. So spiritual progress wasn't about devotion, it was about cash.
That's the allegation. And there's this one anecdote that just captures the whole alleged hypocrisy. He supposedly had 25 servants preparing 35 different dishes for him every day.
And
And he complained about the food, saying he had to go out to a Chinese restaurant instead.
the man who took a vow of non-ownership.
Complaining about his opulent arrangements, it just shows this huge disconnect from the principles he was supposedly teaching.
This all leads us directly into the psychological mechanisms used to maintain control inside the group. The sources describe this demand for perfection, but with a catch.
The catch is that there were no clear rules. Being acceptable depended entirely on the hierarchy's mood. It creates this constant state of stress and uncertainty.
And this is totally different from what new recruits experience, right? They talk about love bombing.
Exactly. You get this huge rush of warmth and acceptance at first. It's a powerful recruitment tool. But ex-members say that love becomes a currency. It's conditional. Yeah. It's for the leaders and for new recruits. But for long-term members, it's often withdrawn to keep them dependent. You have to show them unconditional devotion, but you only get love back if you're perfectly compliant.
Wow. And at the heart of this seems to be a practice called samakritika, self-criticism.
Yes, the devotee has to constantly confess to being the most sinful person and completely submit to the guru's grace.
And what's disturbing is the parallel that critics draw between this and techniques from totalitarian systems.
It's a shocking comparison. They specifically mention Pol Pot's regime.
Pol Pot, how?
The idea is that constant self-criticism disarms you psychologically. It disables your ability to think critically. If you're always confessing that your own perspective is wrong, you start to believe it. You just submit to the group's reality to save yourself.
The sources call it total numbness, a kind of dissociation.
Right. You're just mentally checked out, unable to see the problems. It's not a religious ritual. It's a systematic way of stripping people of their self-worth.
And fear is the engine driving all of this.
Absolutely. The fear of being unloved by God, or maybe more immediately, the fear of being rejected and excommunicated by Butler and the group. That constant fear forces obedience.
The sources say this environment was especially damaging for neuroatypical members in the Polish branch, people with ASD or ADHD.
Yes, because the organization demanded absolute conformity. They wanted to change people into their specific mold. But for neuroatypical individuals, their cognitive wiring, it can't be changed like that. They simply couldn't conform.
And what happened when they couldn't?
They were allegedly subjected to mobbing, humiliation, dehumanization. The pressure would often trigger meltdowns, which is a common reaction to information overload for neuroatypical people.
And the group's reaction to a meltdown was?
Not supportive. They reportedly saw it as disobedience or a spiritual failing. Critics allege the focus wasn't on helping them, but on exploiting them. Because they often struggled with boundaries, they were seen as easier to exploit for their labor.
Which brings us to the money. The foundation's finances apparently relied heavily on labor exploitation.
Ex-members report working for years with no initiation, getting paid way less than market value in the group's businesses, like the printing press.
And often with no benefits, right?
Right. No insurance, no ZUS, which is Poland's social security system. It's a clear picture of exploitation, especially for a spiritual group.
And it seems like this all came to a head after a big event in 2009.
That's right. After a large number of followers left, the Polish Iwite allegedly sold off all his properties, land, buildings, things that were supposed to be for temples and ashrams.
What happened to the money from those sales?
That's the million-dollar question. The allegation is that the funds were sent abroad directly to Chris Butler with zero public accounting.
And there's a suggestion as to why that might have been.
Yes. One source connects it to the arrest of his main long-term donor, a man named Patrick Bowler. Bowler was convicted as a major drug dealer and smuggler.
Okay, so that connects the finances to some very controversial figures. And speaking of connections, Asif has ties to mainstream U.S. politics through Tulsi Gabbard.
Yes, she's publicly called Butler her guru, which has brought a lot of scrutiny. Sources also point to her early employment with a company called QNet.
Which is described in the sources as what?
An MLM, a multi-level marketing company. Many critics call it a pyramid scheme.
And why is that a big deal politically?
Because that model often focuses on recruiting your friends and family rather than selling a product. So it raises ethical questions. And when you combine that with Butler's own past political ambitions, he ran a party called Independence for Godly Government, it starts to look like there was a political agenda that was kept hidden from the Polish members.
We've mentioned Patrick Bowler, the convicted smuggler. There were other scandals too, right?
Yes. Critics also point to legal issues involving the children of another key leader, David Munsey. related to drugs and financial problems. The argument is that these are the bad fruits of a corrupt system.
So with all this going on, the exodus, the scandals, the financial allegations, how does the organization even continue to operate?
In Poland, the main strategy after 2009 was decentralization. Iowa apparently dissolved itself into lots of smaller foundations and associations.
But they're all still centrally controlled.
That's the claim, that it's
Yeah.
all still run by Butler. Critics believe it was a move designed to avoid being delegalized entirely.
And inside, it's all about information control.
Total information control. Followers were reportedly banned from talking to ex-members. And this is key. They were banned from studying certain traditional scriptures, specifically about the role of the Guru Tattva.
Because if they did.
They'd immediately see the contradictions. The isolation maintains the group's reality.
So when we boil this all down, the core conflict is just this massive contrast between the ideals of the Gaudiya Vaishnava tradition and the alleged reality inside Sif and IWT.
Right. Critics argue the whole thing isn't about spiritual advancement at all. It's about maximizing the leader's profit and control. It's turning religion into a business, all for one man.
Which leaves a pretty big question for you, the listener, to think about. When you have this kind of charismatic leadership, and it's combined with these extreme demands for perfection and submission, it can literally redefine words like love, loyalty, even sin. It creates this bubble, this insulated reality that's so hard to see from the inside, no matter what the evidence says. So what defines a real spiritual path when tradition, personal experience, and huge financial interests collide so violently?